Hey guys, so I was doing a recording and I was like almost done with the chapter and then it deleted. So here we go again. I'm sorry. All right, so we're reading Karen 1's story. Let's read it. It was 1965 and I was just beginning my senior year of high school. This was the beginning of our second year together. I found out that his family was moving. His dad was in the Navy, and they were moving to Norfolk, Virginia. I was devastated. We were very close. His family did move. We kept in touch by phone, but 2 months later he called and said, "We got tickets to Lovin' Spoonful concert." He was missing me as much as I was missing him, so his brother's girlfriend and I got on the Greyhound bus, all dressed up in our suits and mini heels, and traveled for 4 hours to Norfolk. They picked us up at the bus station, and we went to the Lovin' Spoonful concert, which was my first ever music concert. And it was great. Do you believe in magic, magic? All right, sorry, I'm a terrible singer. And Summer in the City. It was great. So 2 kids caring very deeply about each other. It was just the right environment for something like sex and pregnancy to occur. And it did. Everything seemed fine until a month later when I missed my period. I never had before. I thought it was just the stress of being without my boyfriend and trying to adjust to being a senior. But then I started gaining weight and I missed my second period. I still tried to deny it. I couldn't fit into my clothes. I was wearing villager dresses at the time. And those penny loafers that were called Weegens. You know, back then you couldn't wear anything but dresses or skirts to school, and they had to be in the middle of your knee or you got sent home. So I would wear my dresses unzipped in the back with the same cardigan sweater over my dress to school every day. And I could remember being so terrified. I mean, just stark terror knowing that I can't keep doing this, trying to fit into my clothes, using safety pins whenever I could. And I was seeing the change in the mirror of just getting bigger and bigger and thinking, oh my God, I have to address this. I was terrified to tell my mom. My dad and I were very close. He's always been my best friend. I had never called him at work. He worked at the Pentagon, and I went to the payphone and I called my dad and said, "I'm in trouble," which, of course, you know what those 3 words mean. That phrase is all you have to say, and he said, "That's okay. We will figure it out. I'll be home soon. I'll be home and we will talk." So I came home and he came into my bedroom and he sat down on the side of my bed and he said, "How far are you?" And I said, "Probably 4 or 5 months." He said, "I wish you had told me sooner. We could have given you a pill." I don't know what kind of pill. Neither do I. But I remember thinking, I'm so glad I don't get a pill. And then he said, "That's okay. I'll talk to your mom and I'll let you know what we decide. I love you. It's okay. Everything is going to be okay." Okay, pausing there. It sounded like he was pretty understanding. He wasn't upset that they were going to, help her. But of course, we know where this is going, right? Because of the name of the book. All right, anyway, I got up the next morning and I'm listening to the AM station on my transistor radio. And I'll never forget, "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry" by B.J. Thomas. Was playing. I mean, to this day, that song stops me in my tracks. I'm lying in bed and I'm hearing my mother sobbing outside my door. And I'm thinking, oh God, the shit has hit the fan. Now I have to face my mom. The only thing I remember after going to Sears and her buying me 2 maternity dresses, and then she took me to a doctor who gave me my first internal exam, which was absolutely mortifying. And the next thing that I remember is that my mom is telling me to pack my suitcase, that I'm going to live with people in D.C. I had no idea this was coming. Apparently, this was a wage home. The maternity home didn't have enough room in it for the number of girls who were pregnant, so they had to farm out girls somewhere else to hide their pregnancy until they were 7 months. Then we would be admitted. So she drove me down to D.C. and pulled out in front of this brownstone. And she walked me in, and I remember it being very dark. I don't remember meeting the people who lived there. My mother walked me up to the steep stairs in the attic. My head brushed the ceiling of the room that was to be my bedroom. All there was up there was a single bed and just a mattress in a frame, a small 4-drawer plain dresser, and an old bathroom with a clawfoot tub and a shower curtain that went around around it in an oval. It scared me because I wasn't used to anything like that. I was to live there and answer to these people every day to what they wanted me to do for them. I very much remember being asked to serve cocktails to their friends when they had their parties. I'm feeling like I was the conversation piece. I was their little unwed mother serving them cocktails. I was 17 years old. I was so depressed. I remember crying every night. It seemed like all night, listening to my radio. That was my only friend. I had my radio and all the songs that were out there then, like Monday Monday by the Mamas and the Papas. There's one part in the Monday, how could you leave and not take me? That just gives me the chills to hear that verse because that's exactly how I felt. They just took me and dumped me off. I didn't know where I was, how long I'd be there, or who these people were, or whether they were going to make me do. I felt totally abandoned and rejected and defective, and just lived in terror every day. I told my mom in a phone call, I'm going to leave and run away, and you're never going to see me again if you don't come and get me out of here. They almost immediately took me out of there and put me in Virginia with a family that was much younger. I think the man worked on Capitol Hill as a representative. They were very good to me in comparison. That was like going from hell to heaven overnight. They had 2 small children, and I was to be the nanny to their children. I remember her sewing very simple shift dresses for me to wear. Both of these families took me to the maternity home on a daily basis so that I could finish my senior year of school. They had a classroom at the maternity home. Then I was admitted when I began my 7th month. My mom came and got me from the house in Virginia and drove me to the maternity facility. It had 3 floors. I was on the 2nd floor. The elevator door opened into the living room area, which they called the congregation room. And it had green vinyl furniture with cold metal arms. I remember in the mornings going down to the bathroom in my slippers, and it would just echo. Carrying my toothbrush in my hand early in the morning or late at night, you could hear girls crying in their rooms. We were only allowed to use our first names and last initial. We were not allowed to ask any questions of each other, like, where did you go to school? Or, are you from this area? Tell us about your experience. We were strictly told, mind your own business, don't ask questions, don't get to know the other girls. You're here for a reason, keep it to yourself. So we did. When we did hang out together, we would go to the main office and sign out and put on our fake wedding rings and walk down the hill. We would either go to a movie or we would walk down another block to a little grocery store. I remember only seeing one movie while I was there, and that was Born Free, which I find very ironic. Hold on, guys. Okay. Those of us who were nearing the time of giving birth would go down on a weekly basis to see the doctor, whoever was there. We would see a different one every time we went. I don't know if they were interns from a local hospital or what the situation was. We were never given any information on what it was like to be pregnant, what to expect from month to month. We were given no instruction or classes regarding childbirth or labor and delivery. The only thing I remember hearing from some of the girls were the signs of labor coming, like your water breaking. And of course, therapy, which was really non-existent, was just meeting with a caseworker once a week, if that. The whole time we would spend with them, they would be talking about, well, are you going to arts and crafts class? What did you do there? Did you make any ceramics? Have you taken any classes on knitting? Are you feeling okay? Then they would say things like, say things about the baby. It was always the baby, never your baby. And they were not talking about adoption, except to say, this experience will end. You will forget that you were here. You will forget that you went through this. It will all be in the past. Given time, it will fade. You will get over it. You know what you did was wrong. You know that you are really not worthy of keeping your own child. You can't provide a home for the child. You can't provide anything that child needs. That child needs a mother and a father, and the things that they can give that child. I remember feeling almost non-deserving of having or keeping my child, but also feeling I don't have the right to be a mom. I don't have the right to be a mother. So we really heard that on an almost daily basis. And the other girls were believing them and reinforcing to each other. You know, they said, you will forget about this and it will all be okay. We aren't going to remember. And after all, we're not supposed to think of ourselves. We're supposed to think of the baby. You're supposed to think of what's best for the baby. Ugh, so gross. What's best for the baby is being with their biological family. You know, whether it's the mom, the dad, grandparents, so forth. But they were really selling the idea that, you know, infertile couples, and this still happens today, are deserving to have babies, that it's okay to buy a baby, that you're not worthy, but they don't actually care about how adoptees feel. Because, by the way, at this time, adoptees were beginning to speak out on the harms, right? The anti-adoption movement started in the 1940s. And, you know, their birth mothers speaking out, not nearly as much, but there were definitely people speaking out. So it's not like it's new. Anyway, when I went into labor, I was lying on that vinyl couch in the living room watching Bewitched on TV. It was 8 o'clock in the evening, and my water broke. I was terrified. I got hysterical. I went to the phone, I called home, and I talked to my mom. I was crying because I was so terrified. And she said, I can't talk right now. Stop being a baby. And she hung up the phone. Oh, God. I swear to God, no matter what point in your life, if I heard that from a parent, I would be no contact so quickly. But especially when you're in the middle of labor and you're about to have a baby and you don't know what the heck is happening, what the hell? I mean, I can tell you from my personal experience, like, even though I kind of knew what to expect, you know, having a baby isn't easy. It's not. Being in labor is very different for everyone, but it's painful. Now, I was not screaming, which is probably why the nurses were like, you're not in labor. Yeah, I had that happen to me. It wasn't until I started crying because I was like, there's something wrong. That's a whole story in itself. But they finally realized that I was in labor and something really was wrong. But that being said, yeah, I mean, like, crazy. Okay, anyway, continuing on. I was still crying, and another girl went and got the house mother. She put me in a cab and got in and went to the hospital. When we got there, she said, all right, go in and give them your first name and last initial. Tell them you're here from the home. I went in by myself. The nurse put me in a wheelchair and took me upstairs in an elevator and got me undressed. She gave me an enema, which I never had before. I don't know why. She prepped me, which included being shaved. I had no idea why that was being done either. The nurse came over and gave me some kind of shot. The next thing I remember, I was out cold. I don't remember anything until after my daughter was born, at 2:30 in the morning. I said, where's my baby? She pulled this bassinet into the room. That's when I learned I had a girl, and she had been born 8 pounds, 1 ounce. I didn't get to hold her until they released me. Okay, that's gross. Like, babies need to bond with their biomom. Biomom, specifically. God, okay, sorry. They put me in a wheelchair and took me out to the front door. There was a cab waiting for me. I got into the cab, and it had a house mother in it. And they handed me my baby. We drove back to the maternity home. But this time, when they pulled in, they went to the building off to the side of the dormitory, which was the hospital building. It was totally off limits to the girls who had not had their babies. So once a girl disappeared in the middle of the night, we never saw her again. They were kept strictly in that hospital building. It was like a ward where they would have, I think, 6 or 8 beds with white iron headboards. I was on the far wall. Next to the bed was a white porcelain table with a drawer, and at the end of each bed was a chair with a vinyl seat. It was very institutional. At a certain time, they would have us pull our chairs into a circle, and they would bring our babies out for us to feed. Then they would take the baby back into the nursery. I stayed there with my baby for 10 days, not knowing what day I was leaving or when she was leaving. On the 10th day, my mom and aunt came in the morning. My aunt brought a baptism gown, and the nurse brought my daughter in, and I dressed her in the gown. My mom said we're going to take her down the street and have her baptized. There was a little chapel, a Catholic chapel called Our Lady of Victory. We went back to the maternity home, and my mom and my aunt went somewhere. About an hour later, a woman came back and said, "Come with me." They took me down the hall to this room that was empty except for a rocking chair. Then she came back with my baby and handed her to me and said, "You have an hour to say goodbye." God, they're so far from being empathetic and supportive, and it's just disgusting. Like, imagine having 1 hour to say goodbye to your child that you'll never see again because you had zero choice, right? Not because you're a harmful parent, because clearly she's not, but because they want to steal your child. And that's in the best circumstances, right? So most of the time they don't even allow that. I mean, it's just so disgusting. Like, these people should have been charged. And I'm saying, like, the CEOs, I don't know if, I don't know. I have conflicting opinions, but they really need to have been charged. And there really should be, I don't know if reparations would be a thing, but something to make up for all of this harm. At least admit that there was harm being done. So, I mean, just gross. Just gross. Anyway, I put her on my lap and kind of unwrapped her blanket to look at her and kissed her feet and put her up on my shoulder. I can feel her there. I can still feel her there. I told her how much I loved her and all about her dad and how much he loved me. I told her that he was a good guy. I told her I hoped she would understand and forgive me because I didn't have a choice. I had to do what they told me to do. I had nowhere to go. I had no one to help me. I just begged her to forgive me. And it just seemed like minutes later, that woman came back. I remember thinking, how often does she do this? How can she do this? She said, "I have to take her now." I just sat in there for a long time, rocking and rocking and rocking. I don't even know how long I was in there. Then I walked back and packed up my suitcase. The nurse said, "Your mother will be here soon. Go out the front door." And there was my mom, so I walked down the stairs and got in the car and drove home. It was just really weird being home because I wasn't even the same person anymore. I was changed by that. I was expected to go back and be this teenager and live under their rules. I was a mom, but I wasn't allowed to be a mom. All I did was just lie in bed because I think I was just in shock. I just knew something is really wrong here. I was just so empty. They would call to say, "Come in and sign the papers." I can't do that. I can't do that now. Yes, okay, soon. At some point, I did go in and sign those papers because I knew that I had no choice. There's no way I was going to be able to keep her. They said, "Well, you would have to pay all the expenses if you keep your daughter." I didn't have any money. I was still living at home. The social worker came over to me with these papers and put them down on the table. I remember there was just a pen and the papers on the table, and she flipped it back to the last page and said, "Sign here and date it." I did. I guess I was too naive to even know that I should read it, try to understand what it said. I am just astounded that I got no explanation. Nothing happened in front of a judge. No lawyer was there. It was just the two of us. So I signed. I remember walking out the door and that door just slamming at my back, like I had been thrown away. So I went home and I tried to get on with my life, like they said I would. I was going to forget. I got married 2 years later, and had my second daughter. I had married an abusive man. We moved often. I really just fought to survive throughout that 11-year marriage. I remember always pulling out the pictures that I had when I was alone and just crying over the pictures of the baby, thinking, where are you? Who are you? Are you okay? And being so worried about, was she alive or dead? Is she hurting? Then I had another child, 3 years after my second, and still struggling with the abuse of my marriage, until we moved to New Mexico and I left him. I understand that's pretty common for mothers who have lost a child to adoption to marry an abusive man because we feel pretty worthless. I got divorced and moved back to Northern Virginia area, where most of my extended family lived at the time. I got remarried in 1984 and told my husband, or soon-to-be husband, about my experience, and he was very accepting. It's really tragic. We were not told any of our rights. We were not told we had the right to keep our own baby. We were not helped to keep our baby. There was a conflict of interest in the agencies not providing us with legal counsel. The social workers should have been required to tell us what was available to us so we could make an informed decision. So that is true. And this still happens today where they don't tell you all the available options. They really just essentially lie. Now, that being said, there is something in Congress and House of Representatives where they're supposed to at least give you a brochure with informed decisions. But, I mean, it's just being introduced. So I will just say it's not being passed yet. And we're going to talk about that later. But I worry what is going to be in that brochures and how much accurate information is going to be in there. So just throwing that out there. All right. Anyway, where were we? We were never told anything except adoption. It was the only option offered to us. We weren't told that we could get child support from the fathers. We weren't told that we could apply for welfare or aid to families with dependent children, which was available then. There was a lack of informed consent. All right, so even in today's world, even though there's more information out there, it's a little bit more accessible, there still seems to be a lot of lies out there. And that's a huge problem, and it's not to the same extent, but it's definitely still happening, which obviously is a problem. Anyway, all of our rights were abused, ignored, and abused. The rights that people take for granted today. We were denied. We didn't know because we were young. We trusted our parents, and we trusted authority. We trusted our elders, and we were taught to respect them. They would tell us what was best. So we figured if that's what's best, then that was what we needed to do. They've injured and damaged millions of people. I completely agree with that part. My parents didn't come to my aid. I felt very abandoned by them, physically and emotionally. I wanted them to say, if you want to keep your baby, you can come home with your baby. They never said that. They never said, you can keep your baby and you and her father can live with us until you can get on your feet. His parents never said that. No offers were made to help keep my child. I just didn't know how I could do it all by myself with no offers of help. If her father had said, I will send you money, keep her, take her home, I never thought, I'm just going to keep my baby and to hell with them all. I didn't feel that power, and I think that's because I was so ashamed and so full of guilt and not knowing what else I could do. I just knew that my parents paid a lot of money for me to be there. And I think that supported my thinking at the time, which was, how can I go against them after what they've suffered because I made a decision, a judgment that I should not have made, which was having sex when I was not married? How can I put them through more agony and more expense and more work? You're just so beaten down by being in that place and being told, you can't. And you aren't a mother, and you don't deserve to be a mother. And you can never be a mother. You can't provide anything. It was just overwhelming. The odds were all overwhelming because nobody was offering a hand. No one. The whole point was just to keep us scared all the time and feeling guilt all the time and compliant. You do this and you go home. It makes me very, very angry today to think about the manipulation. It was evil to me. It was evil. To think that these people could play God like that with people's lives and determine who can have a child and who can't. And that is still happening today. The manipulation, not only of the birth parents, but also of the adoptive parents, also of the adoptees, right? There's tons of it. And it's so sad that it's happening still in today's world. Despite us having more access to information, there is still very much this rose-colored glasses of everything's going to be rainbows and butterflies. It's all going to be perfect. And when it's not, it's chaos and it's the fault of the child and it's genetics and all this stuff. But what they don't teach is that there's trauma. They don't do enough educating. They don't give enough support. And that is a huge issue and red flags, like red flags all over the place for me. Anyway, before my phone dies, before I end this video, let's keep going. Nobody ever said, "What do you want, Karen? What do you want? Do you want to keep your baby?" Even though our bodies were telling us that our baby was ours, they were counteracting all of those normal, natural feelings with, no, don't even think of that because it's not your child. It's these people's child over here. It's been promised to them. They were always real to us. This baby was going to them, and they deserved it. They can't have children. They should be happy. You're giving your child to someone so wonderful who has so much to offer the child. You should be grateful for that. You should be grateful we're solving your problem. You made this mistake. You caused this problem for everyone, not just for my parents, but for everyone. You've put an enormous amount of people out because you're illegal sex. Sex isn't illegal, by the way. And now you must do the right thing and give the baby to these people over here who are married and let it have a father and a mother that can give it everything you can't give it. By the way, we're going to talk about that because it's so disgusting how they put adoptive parents on a pedestal. Like, oh, they have everything. Oh, but then there's like all these things like, oh, they get tax breaks and they get help and, they're fundraising and all sorts of stuff. And it's like, they're no better off than the bio parents. And also the bio parents are much better, not just statistically, but biologically, genetically, all of that jazz, important things that really do need to take into account to be with their child. That's not to say that there aren't bio parents that aren't harmful out there, but we're not talking about those parents, obviously. There are obviously alternatives to adoption when and if it's necessary, but that's like less than 5%. So anyway, continuing on, there was such an emotional and mental damage done by all of that. And it has intensified with every year passing, It just got worse and worse and worse. I'm very overprotective of my children because I'm afraid that they too will disappear, And like when they were born, expecting somebody to come in and take them from me, and not being able to have them away from my sight because somebody could just take them. Always trying to make everything right for them because I was not a worthy person, a worthy, decent person. I was defective, and I was substandard, and I have spent 36 years of my life trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect person, the perfect woman, the perfect employee, and the perfect wife. Perfection is a trauma response, by the way. I have nightmares and flashbacks that could catch me totally off guard. I mean, even a song could just freeze me in my tracks. You're haunted by it. I don't know how you ever get over that feeling. The only way to heal from this is to be accepted by your child and for the public to know the truth of what really happened and understand it's the truth. Instead of always pushing adoption as this loving, wonderful rescue thing. Yes, that may be the case for people who adopt. It's just not the case for us. Okay, so first of all, it's not usually the case. Like I said, less than 5% of cases were necessary. And I say external care. That doesn't necessarily mean adoption, but it's not being rescued. It's just giving a safe, loving home. And majority of the time, when it's necessary, it's a temporary situation. But it's this white savior complex. And I say white savior specifically because majority of adoptive parents are white. So that is the term. And as we've heard from the book, obviously, majority of the kids that were given up during this time were also white, but very much so. You are never whole. Never. It's a hugely damaging thing. It's an enormously injuring, painful, fracturing amputation of families. And the closest thing to healing you can find is your child being willing to know you and love you and being accepted in their life, where you should have been all along and you were denied. We were not criminals. We're mothers. The difference was I was not an authenticated mother. I was an illegal mother. I was a denied mother, and I had to come home and live my life after being robbed of my child. It's as if I was unwilling accomplice to the kidnapping of my own child. Kidnapping. Yeah, big time. It's human trafficking. Not that she sold her baby. She had zero choice, but, that's exactly what it is. And then you have to live with the trauma of knowing you didn't stop it. How do you do that? All right, anyway, that is the end of Karen's story. Next week, we're going to do Pam's story and then start chapter 7. I will see you then. Thank you guys for staying tuned with us. I have so much more information coming. I'm super excited for the calendar, and we're really pumping out some information here, so we got this.